And here's what's interesting too, it's so hypocritical. If I was sitting in a room with her, I'd say, have you considered that the way you've defined love means that you don't love me?
One other thing you mentioned before, and I really got a lot out of this because I listened to your video a while ago about this book, your review of it, and it was very good. And one thing you mentioned was love, this redefinition of love. And this is something else that I'm pretty passionate about as well, because what I don't think Christians realize, and this would be a great Bible study, by the way, especially for women, to really understand what the biblical definition of love is, because God isn't just this ball of love. He has other attributes. And people, I believe, actually limit him whenever they just focus on that one attribute. There is no holiness, there is no other aspect, like he's all powerful, omniscient, like he's all these other aspects, but people only focus on love. And that's like an imbalanced, shortchanged type of love. And you quoted First Corinthians, and one thing that I really enjoyed that you pointed out with that was love, real love rejoices in truth and not evil. And so you have to look at those two things. So what does the Bible say about evil? What does the Bible say about love? What are these two things? And this book is very antithetical to that. And I wrote down this one aspect to it because, and you pointed this out, how not even Jesus can love us by her definition of
By
love.
her definition, yeah.
Yes. I would love for you to kind of talk more about that. I loved how you broke that down.
Yeah, let me go to that chapter because
Sure.
it's really good to set up the context of this chapter. Okay, so in this section of the book, she's talking about love, right? That's kind of where she's giving her definition. And she talks about getting an email from a lady that she used to be in the same church with. And I'm assuming this is a more conservative type of church. And the woman basically said, can I ask you something? I know that you and Abby love each other so much. And I think this is in reference to the nature of the relationship being same sex, right? And she says that, it's really something, the love you have for each other. But at the same time, I still believe that gayness is wrong. And I want to be able to love you unconditionally, but I'd have to abandon my beliefs. What am I supposed to do with this God conflict? And so Glennon responds to her and actually says, I felt really, felt some empathy for her. But she wrote her back and said, first of all, thank you for knowing that you have a choice to make. She says, you can't say, I love you, but. She says, love has no buts. If you want to change me, you do not love me. If you feel warm toward me, but you also believe I'm going to burn in hell, you do not love me. And so she goes on to say, yeah, essentially, you've got a choice. Thank you for being intellectually honest about that. But then I'm thinking about Jesus, who talked about hell more than anyone, talked about judgment, talked about everlasting punishment. Whatever you want to say about the words he used for hell, he talked about everlasting punishment. I mean, it's just clear. And you can only get that kind of Jesus that's without hell if you completely get rid of Revelation too. So, if you look at Jesus, at least as Jesus is written about in the Bible, he loves, and there are buts. He loves everyone. And part of his love expressing itself through his justice, because as we know, Melissa, God is not made up of all these different parts where like his love is like this part of him, and then his justice is this part of him, and then there's like this pie, and he's got a justice slice and a love slice.
Exactly.
He is perfectly holy, 100% love, and he's perfectly holy, 100% justice. Those things are not in conflict. They're part of the, part is, it's hard to find language because there's really not language. They're not parts. They are fully, wholly integrated in the being of God.
Yes.
And so God loves people while he judges them and sentences them to hell, right? So it's that exists. And so for her to say, you can't, if you say you love me and you want to change me, you don't love me. Well, what did Jesus come to do? Change us.
Yes.
Save us, yes, but change us and conform us into his image. So according to her definition, and here's what's interesting too, it's so hypocritical. And I don't say that from a place of condemnation toward her, but I mean, if I was sitting in a room with her, I'd say, have you considered that the way you've defined love means that you don't love me because you're asking me to change my beliefs on something? according to your definition, you don't love me either. Now, at that point, I think she'd have to be intellectually honest enough to say, okay, I don't love you. Or she would have to figure out a way to explain that, because that to me seems pretty logically sound to say, if this is your definition, love has no buts,
Mhm.
then and you shouldn't want to change me either. And she might even say, well, I don't want to change you, but that's not what I'm getting from the book,
Mhm.
right? I'm getting
Yes.
that she believes, and Rohr talks like this a lot, not to conflate the two, but we'll move to Rohr for a second.
Yeah.
Rohr does this a lot in his book, where he will characterize people who disagree with him, and he does it in a really nice and congenial way, but he calls people toxic.
Yes.
He calls people, he even uses the phrase traumatic brain injury to refer to people who believe in the atoning work of Jesus on the cross, guys.
Wow.
I mean, so if we define love that way, then it's very one-sided.
Hmm. Yes. It's very interesting. The double standards is that if you're going to hold yourself to your own standard, that means that you have to follow your own rules. So if that's what your love is no buts, then you have to love people like that, whether you agree with them or not, which makes no sense, because then you're saying, no, there's an objective basis for this. It's like this big ball of subjective mess, right? That you
Yeah.
get into. And it reminds me of, it is in Second Corinthians. Paul is talking to the Corinthians, and he's talking about being unequally yoked. And a lot of people use this verse for marriage, which is true. You can use this verse for marriage, but it's more than that. He's saying that, and I find this to be a very new age thing. It's like he's saying, what does darkness have to do with light? You can't mix the two. You can't have righteousness along with unrighteousness. You can't have idolatry along with this and that. Like, you cannot mix the two. And that what it reminded me of is, those bougie coexist stickers on the back of Priuses, some dude with a man bun, he's, trying to, the coexist sticker. It's like, that's what it is. That's what it reminds me of, to be unequally yoked. You have this coexist sticker, but what people don't realize is that it's a huge contradiction, because they all can't be equal and they all can't be true.